Death sentence New York. Their games revealed. And it's not just New York, but Brussels and London, and it's all declared by their own data. This chart and this infographic tell you everything you need to know about what's really going on with COVID-19. I'll put them both full screen for a second and then we'll get down to discussing them. We've already seen the absurdity of New York State and New York City's figures. The chance that State of New York's figures represent the COVID-19 virus are 1 in 500 million. The odds of New York City's figures representing the virus are 1 in 32 million billion. But that doesn't matter now, as the chart and the infographic are so much simpler to understand. We've seen that the UK figures continue to abuse all logic, exceeding even the no lockdown projection. Far from being normal, the virus just heads off in a horizontal channel, adding cases for as long as it suits the government to do so. I would never have believed I could witness such a thing. Cases post-peak almost touch the natural virus decline line, but continue along above it. Why bother with a virus when you can just invent numbers to suit and keep the crisis going? None of that matters now, however, because this chart tells you everything you need to know. Up till now, I've tracked 50 countries plus New York and California, as well as our benchmark Hubei. For this exercise, I decided that it needed the absolute assurance of no stone unturned, so our data set, courtesy of World Health Organization and the World Bank, includes every country in the world and every small island. We won't go into the arcane data, but I'll mention that I trimmed countries with less than 1,000 cases, which makes the worst countries look better, with countries that have escaped the virus eliminated. I also limited it to countries with over 1 million population, so we were dealing with real countries and not small islands and principalities. That left 90 countries, and this chart summarizes the rather compelling, even overwhelming result. We'd noticed the New York situation, of course, and likewise Belgium and the UK situation, but it was only while doing the chart update that the absurd nature of results really came home to me. Time and again we saw that Asian Far Eastern countries escaped almost scot-free. Time and again we saw that European nations that were no friend to Brussels did fine, while countries closer to home got the authorized EU hit. I finally decided to test that as a possible hypothesis, and you're looking at the result. In each of 3 key measures, the closer you get to one of the 3 centers of power, the more severely you get hit by the virus. Or more accurately, the more severely society pays the price of the dramatically increased figures put out by the power centers. We know New York is fraudulent and that the UK figures do not reflect the virus, with death rates over 100% when they are properly lagged. We know people have been looking at excess mortality and seeing anomalies, and finding empty hospitals where they should be crammed with cases. That is invaluable work, but here is the simple demonstration of something that simply should not occur. The virus is a simple biomachine. It cannot detect, we presume, political power. Yet it is political power that is being demonstrated as the causative factor in this chart. Except for the moment that the bars reflect severity of the contagion and look at the 4 domains. World x Western power centers at left, EU, US and UK. Within the EU, we have European Other for countries in the continent of Europe, but which are distant from or no friends of Brussels. We have the EU core countries, Germany, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy et al., and we have Belgium, Brussels, HQ to the EU. In the US grouping we have Canada right next door, and the USA as a whole, most of whom do their best to get on with their lives free of New York and Washington's games and influence. Then we have the state of New York, and finally Manhattan, New York City, the world of bankers and high finance, and the people they do business with. Finally, on the right, we have the UK, looking a little alone, somewhat attached to both the Anglo-Western alliance of the US-UK War of Terror and the UK-EU element. Notice how the world is almost invisible. The numbers are astonishing. 3.3% death rate versus our 13%, or is it up to 15% now? I barely pay attention, it's so conveniently absurd. 1,200 deaths per 100 million population, whereas New York City has crested 2 million cases and 221,000 deaths per 100 million population. In terms of our standardized 9 per 1,000 mortality as a benchmark, the world brushed off the virus with 0.4 of a day's worth of deaths, less than half a day's deaths, and they're done. And they really are done in many cases. South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, to name just three, which have seen the virus off and now get to resume normal life, barely touched by the virus. Look at that almost invisible World X section. That's what we could have had were we dealing with honest and honourable politicians. Instead, flushed with their power, they have imposed their deaths and cases figures on us, imposed lockdown on us, and show no compunction to let us off any time soon. How bad is it then, and what do those bars represent? The blue bar is C19 days. How many days normal deaths has the contagion been equivalent to? We choose a Western level of 9 per 1,000 mortality for our standard benchmark. That's 900,000 out of a 100 million population per annum, again our standard population, that each region's figures are normalized to, e.g. add 50% to get 66 million UK to 100 million. Divide 900,000 by 365.25 and you get 2,400 or so deaths per day. So e.g. 10,000 deaths per 100 million population would be just over 4 days as the total impact of the virus to date. So whereas the world has got by with barely 0.4 of a day and European other is likewise invisible, EU core countries approach 10 days while we're at 17. Overall the US is at around 5. Our societies shut down to avoid 5 days deaths, and that UK lockdown saving not a single case or life, but see my other videos for that. The state of New York is up at 40 days, but New York City beggars belief at 90 days, 3 full months of deaths, while the rest of the world needs barely half a day. And 90 is bad enough, but 90 versus 0.4, that's the orange bars, how much we've been penalized for being citizens of a power center, with New York City citizens suffering a media burden of over 180 times. I say media burden because while the virus is real and some people will have died, it is extremely unlikely that they represented anything unusual as a total versus normal deaths in society. That is the role of excess mortality analysis, and beyond the scope of this presentation. The point is that the medical situation is real, but the scale of the crisis is, until I see ironclad proof to the contrary, entirely manufactured. And what proof would you propose to demonstrate that a simple biomachine was somehow genetically attuned to doing far more damage to societies that were Western only, political powerhouses? Do they read the media, stay abreast with Fox News and CNN? Do you see COVID-19 talking heads discussing the latest initiatives in Washington, London, New York and Brussels? No, and nor does the virus report its own cases and deaths. Those are fed to us by politicians who love their games, their American exceptionalism, their EU greed for more people, more power, and the UK's brief flirtation with independence despite being a willing, from the politician's perspective, player in the war of terror. Add to that Herr Gates and Ferguson and a report I had intended to write, but which got sidelined by this. Reading the Imperial College report, my anger at the Johnson-Ferguson betrayal was reignited. The report is nothing more than a sales pitch for vaccines by massive intervention. Gates predicts a pandemic 5 years ago, lying 26 times in 2 minutes 30 seconds in the Fox News 5th April interview that I took apart a while back. Held a dress rehearsal last year, Event 201 or some such, in October 2019, and funded Imperial College and Ferguson apparently, the author of the utterly bogus 530,000 deaths threat. The report was explicit: mass threat of death, massive intervention, vaccines. As simple as that, and it came to pass. No normal until lockdowns. We knew all that, but as this fell out, it reveals something profound. It is not enough that we are experiencing something. It is that others are experiencing nothing. Our populations are falling over themselves to justify the government position, the biggest instance of Stockholm Syndrome in history. Yet this chart makes clear, utterly clear, that there is an alternative world out there where the issue is negligible and all you had to be was not Western. Just don't be a Western power center and you can get away with a massively reduced impact on your society. At one remove, just being State of New York or EU core and not Belgium, there's an immediate benefit. At two removes, being out in the main USA, and I should have included California, which has had about a Hubei level contagion, is dramatically better than sharing a state with New York City. Being in Europe, the continent, but no friend of Brussels, has been massively beneficial to Greece and Poland, for example, or Norway. You think lockdown saved you? Do you see lockdown anywhere here? New York City is under lockdown, and it's the worst hit place on the planet. Think how much worse it would have been without lockdown. You're not getting it, are you? Look at those charts. That's not about lockdown. That's distance from the Western schemers. Being an Asian or Far Eastern society, including Australia or New Zealand, is by far the most effective COVID-19 measure a society can have. But where can you buy that? And can you imagine the broadcast? In a new initiative, CDC announces that countries wishing to combat the virus should move away from New York. And yet, as the chart makes clear, it would absolutely be the best move possible. If only we could move countries away from New York, Brussels and London. But many, if not most of us, are in those countries. And there the issue becomes simple. Now that you've seen this, what are you going to do about it? Well, here, same thing, but with our original 50. My first infographic, and I'm rather chuffed with it. It looks pretty, but its message is simple and dire, the same as the chart. Pray that you don't live in or near New York, London or Brussels. And it has nothing to do with the pandemic and everything to do with what has been done in the name of the pandemic. These figures and those of the chart aren't complex analysis. They're just fourth May's cases and deaths normalized to 100 million population. That's it. So there you have it. I'll no doubt be uploading the data and spreadsheet to the evidence repository, slowly being built around our new Lucet Veritas channel, Let the Truth Shine Out. I certainly never expected the truth to be so elegantly and simply demonstrable. This really is about as simple as it gets. The further you are from New York, London or Brussels, the safer you are from the games that politicians are playing with your lives. It may still be tough, but it won't be the virus figures generating the crisis or justifying the response. I know it's been absurd in Australia and New Zealand and no doubt elsewhere as well. What can I say? People fell for the huge figures put out by the government. If your figures aren't huge, how come the rebellion isn't flourishing? Because it should be even more compelling. Whatever your situation, I hope that you'll appreciate the message in the government's own data, as I've always maintained it must be. Their own data condemning them. Absorb it as you've absorbed the memes, and this time throw it all back in their face. A political virus targeting political power centers? I think not. Politicians playing with people's lives and manipulating the facts? That doesn't even need a reply, does it? Pitchfork time and take your pick. This infographic or this slide. Share the hell out of them. It really, truly doesn't get more blatantly obvious than this. And as a tiny hint and recipe, get the population in millions, cases and deaths for a specific day, times cases and deaths by 100 over the population in millions, take deaths per 100 million times 365.25, divided by 900,000 to get C19 days, find the average of each group of countries, find the average death rate for each group of countries. Treat New York State as a 20 million pop country and New York City as a 9 million country. That's it basically, as simple as that. We could have avoided lockdown if more people had realized that 3085 times 66 over 59.17 does not equal 530,000. Maybe now the game will be so obvious we can finally put them all in jail, where they absolutely belong. No apologies. They destroyed societies for greed, no mitigating circumstances, just nail them. I'm still Andrew May, the 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, Andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.